Have you ever wondered what would happen if our complex global web of trade, technology, and international alliances suddenly collapsed? How quickly would our familiar sense of stability dissolve if powerful nations could no longer count on distant resources and cooperative treaties? It might sound like an extreme scenario, but it's exactly what happened over 3,000 years ago, during one of the most dramatic periods of ancient history, the Bronze Age collapse. Today, we're delving into a time when vast palace states, all interconnected by sprawling trade routes, were brought to their knees by forces that seem alarmingly familiar even now: resource shortages, mass migrations, and internal conflicts. And here's the astonishing part. These disruptions toppled entire civilizations in a shockingly short span. Their downfall shows just how vulnerable a highly connected world can be when multiple crises strike all at once. So get ready to journey back in time and explore how civilizations that looked unstoppable could suddenly crumble. But before we start, can I ask you to please subscribe to the channel if you have not done so? Thank you. A series of events across the Eastern Mediterranean and the Near East during the Late Bronze Age resulted in a total collapse or significant weakening of hitherto flourishing empires and kingdoms. Although each region experienced this collapse or decline, evidence of widespread destruction layers, abandoned settlements, and significant cultural changes was common. Archaeological layers dating to around 1200 BCE at sites such as Mycenae and Tiryns reveal substantial destruction. The Palace of Nestor in Mycenaean Pylos appears to have suffered a comparable fate before being abandoned. Tablet inscriptions found chiefly at Pylos and Knossos offer insights into Mycenaean administrative prowess. Yet they disappear abruptly at the time of the collapse, suggesting a dramatic break with palace-based governance. Further shifts are evident in the move from palatial to sub-Mycenaean pottery and in evolving burial practices and settlement structures. The palace states, having prospered through maritime trade, tribute, and warfare, were likely weakened by internal disturbances and by threats from foreign armies and raiding groups. Earthquakes may have exacerbated these vulnerabilities. As palatial economies crumbled, smaller autonomous communities replaced centralized states, ushering in the so-called Greek Dark Ages. During this turbulent era, distinctly Mycenaean method of writing by tablet inscriptions, called linear B writing, vanished, and overall cultural production declined. In ancient Egypt, especially under the late 19th and early 20th dynasties, evidence of similar instabilities exists. Inscriptions from Karnak, Memphis, and Medinet Habu speak of battles with various foreign adversaries collectively termed the Sea Peoples. Mortuary temple of Ramesses III at Medinet Habu also features extensive reliefs depicting these conflicts. Textual sources such as Papyrus Harris attest to significant economic stress, worker strikes, and food shortages late in Ramesses III's reign. Although Egypt avoided outright collapse, these invasions and other troubles strained its resources and exposed systemic problems. Labor unrest in Deir el-Medina amplified these pressures. By the close of the 20th dynasty, Egypt had relinquished much of its Levantine sphere of influence. Internal power struggles paved the way for the Third Intermediate Period, which began around 1070 BCE and was characterized by diminishing royal authority and ascendant priestly and local elites. Anatolia, home to the Hittite Empire, experienced a precipitous collapse that had far-reaching consequences. The capital city, Hattusa, reveals a layer of violent destruction followed by its abandonment. Similar patterns emerge at other prominent sites such as Tahun Tassa and Alalach in the south. One letter from Ugarit references a crisis that demanded the immediate recall of Hittite forces, suggesting multiple fronts of conflict. By the late 13th century BCE, the empire was already in a precarious state due to multiple factors. The collapse of Hattusa opened Anatolia to fragmentation, resulting in various Neo-Hittite and Aramaean successor states. In the Levant, the collapse manifested in a region that had once served as an important crossroads linking Egypt, Anatolia, Mesopotamia, and the Aegean. The destruction of Ugarit, located at Ras Shamra in modern Syria, stands out as emblematic of a region on the precipice. The city's royal archives contain letters pleading for military reinforcements that never materialized. For example, after invading forces had captured its port at Rashu, the last king of Ugarit, Amurapi, made a desperate plea to the Hittite viceroy at Carchemish with the following words. To the king, my lord say, thus Amurapi, your servant, I wrote you twice, thrice, news regarding the enemy. May my lord know that now the enemy forces are stationed at Rashu, and their avant-garde forces were sent to Ugarit. Now may my lord send me forces and chariots, and may my lord save me from the forces of this enemy. Other coastal centers such as Byblos, Tyre and Sidon similarly exhibit evidence of conflagration or social upheaval. As the Mycenaeans, Hittites and Egyptians all grappled with crises at home, Levantine city-states found themselves disconnected from stable networks of trade and protection. Many coastal cities were sacked, forcing inland city-states to fend for themselves. Archaeological traces from Ibla, Katna and Imar indicate destruction or abandonment in the early 12th century BCE. Furthermore, cuneiform texts from Imar document severe disruptions in trade and tribute structures, as well as periods of famine. Syrian urban centers, once protected by Hittite power, were suddenly vulnerable to rival powers and marauders. Some localities managed to reconstitute themselves within more localized frameworks, though they never regained the reach or complexity characteristic of their earlier Bronze Age status. Mesopotamia, encompassing Kassite Babylonia in the south and Middle Assyria in the north, experienced different strains. Though largely shielded from maritime assaults, this region still suffered from internal power struggles and external threats, such as invasions by Elam. The Kassite dynasty gradually lost its grip on Babylonia, in part due to disruptions in the trade of tin and other metals crucial to bronze production. In Assyria, core sites such as Assur and Nimrud, Kalhu, continued to function but saw significant military and administrative shifts. Although Mesopotamia did not witness the kind of wholesale destruction seen in some Mediterranean areas, it nevertheless experienced substantial destabilization and was forced to reorganize politically and economically. While the fact of the occurrence of the Bronze Age collapse in the Eastern Mediterranean and the Near East is not debatable, the actual causes or contributory factors have been debated for over a century. One of the earliest works on the causes of the collapse points to large-scale external invasions, particularly by the so-called Sea Peoples. This idea can be traced back to Emmanuel de Rougé, curator of the Louvre in the mid-19th century. It was later developed by Egyptologists and historians who examined inscriptions at Medinet Habu and Karnak. These inscriptions, dating to the reigns of Merneptah and Ramesses III, describe battles against seafaring enemies, as well as defense against invasion by land. Various groups, including the Sherdan, Shardana, Shekelesh, Luka, Peliset, Cheka, and Denyen were named. Scholars have long attempted to match these names with known ethnic groups or regions. For instance, the Luka may be connected to Lycia in southwestern Anatolia, while the Peliset are often linked to the Philistines who originate from the Aegean. The Denyen has been tentatively compared to the Danaoi of Homeric epics, or to a people of coastal Anatolia or the Levant. The case has been made for possible central or western Mediterranean origins for groups like the Sherdan, Shardana, or Shekelesh, suggesting connections to Sardinia or Sicily, respectively. These identifications are based on correlating linguistic clues in Egyptian transcriptions with place names from the Aegean, Anatolia, the Levant, and the Western Med. Archaeological evidence of destruction in coastal sites such as Ugarit and Pylos appear to align chronologically with the recorded raids. While the invasion theory resonates with certain textual accounts and destruction horizons, it struggles to explain inland upheavals, such as those in Mesopotamia and certain parts of Syria, where direct engagement with maritime raiders is less attested. It also overlooks internal socio-political strife that likely contributed to the overall failure of these societies. An alternative theory pins the collapse on climatic fluctuations and environmental stresses during the Late Bronze Age. This idea was pioneered in part by Harvey Weiss, who drew on paleoclimatological evidence in Mesopotamia to suggest that the collapse may have arisen from prolonged droughts and agricultural shortfalls. Pollen records, lakebed sediment data, and isotopic analyses have pointed to reduced rainfall. Relatedly, certain Hittite and Ugaritic texts record grain shortages or unsuccessful attempts to secure food shipments from neighboring regions. Although climatic change explains external trade disruptions and failing harvests, which placed the palace economies of the time under severe strain, it might not have played an exclusive role. A further perspective involves large-scale natural catastrophes, such as earthquakes or volcanic eruptions. Evidence from excavation at Ras Shamra, Ugarit, led to the proposition that cataclysmic seismic events were the primary force behind site destructions throughout the eastern Mediterranean. This is supported by observation of toppled walls and collapsed structures at sites like Mycenae and Tiryns. There is, however, lack of clear evidence of earthquake or volcanic damage. Also, the scope of devastation was too widespread to be attributed solely to localized disasters. Technological and economic transitions have also been identified as a cause, specifically the gradual shift from bronze to iron and the consequent breakdown of elaborate trade networks. Economies of Bronze Age Mediterranean and Near East civilizations heavily relied on the steady flow of metals from external regions. In fact, letters discovered at Ugarit contain multiple mentions of delayed or missing tin shipments, reflecting vulnerabilities within supply chains. As warfare and political chaos disrupted the movement of goods, local iron production gained appeal because it required no distant procurement of tin. Nevertheless, the emergence of iron technology was not an overnight revolution. While disruptions in trade weakened the power of states that depended on bronze, the change to iron is not sufficient explanation for the rapid collapse of large palace complexes and their accompanying administrative systems. We can see that no single explanation seems adequate to explain the catastrophic events that affected so many interconnected societies. As such, contemporary archaeologists advocate what is commonly termed a general systems collapse. According to this theory, the cities and kingdoms of late Bronze Age were highly interdependent, relying on each other for metals, grain, and diplomatic backing. Any disruption, whether a major famine, an unexpected wave of migrants, or a shift in military alliances, could amplify structural weaknesses. Letters from Ugarit to the Hittite court, as well as ancient Egyptian diplomatic and economic records, highlight fragile interdependencies that easily fall apart when disrupted. States like Mycenaean Greece and the Hittite Empire might have weathered limited invasions or brief periods of drought, but coping with multiple concurrent crises was impossible. Under such circumstances, local rebellions escalated as economic support dwindled. Foreign threats gained a foothold as armies became overstretched, and essential trade in copper and tin froze due to the collapse of maritime routes. These events ultimately destroyed the foundations of palace-based governance, leading to abandoned cities and the rise of new polities in their place. The Bronze Age collapse stands as a clear reminder that even the most formidable and interconnected societies can be undone when confronted by simultaneous crises. Across the eastern Mediterranean and the Near East, once mighty palatial centers fell to ruins, abandoned by rulers who had thrived on extensive trade networks, tribute, and military might. Archaeological evidence of sudden destruction, written records of pleas for aid that never arrived, and abrupt shifts in material culture suggest a system which collapsed under an intense barrage of crises, including warfare, resource shortages, and social upheavals. For all its distance from us in time, this ancient catastrophe has crucial lessons for the present. First, it underscores how much political stability and economic prosperity of our society rely on continuous communication, cooperation, and peaceful coexistence with other societies. In a world as interconnected as ours, the loss of resource or critical components from collapse of allied polities can have serious reverberating consequences. It also shows that even powerful states are not immune to significant environmental and climatic pressures, especially when there is failure to predict or adapt to them. The Bronze Age collapse illustrates that technological change, while beneficial, does not necessarily guarantee resilience. As the experience of the late Bronze Age civilizations show, technological leaps can be double-edged. They can expose new vulnerabilities in individuals and society at large. Indeed, no civilization or state, however advanced, is impervious to the effects of multiple concurrent stresses. Their experience should prompt us to reflect on the potential fragility of our own global systems, such as our information and power systems, trade networks and alliances. We are reminded that foresight, adaptability, and collaboration are essential if we hope to strengthen resilience and preserve our hard-earned progress in the face of emerging threats. By studying how the late Bronze Age world unraveled, we gain a deeper appreciation of the delicate foundations on which our modern civilization rests, and a better appreciation of the need for vigilance in order to protect it. This is the end of today's video. Hope you enjoyed it and learned a thing or two. If you did, please like and hit the notification bell so you are notified every time I release a new video. Your feedback is important, so please let me know what you think of the video in the comments. Thank you for watching and see you next time.